There's a certain trick that can make your blues solos go from good to great that'll bust you out of that rut of sticking to a single scale whenever you're taking a solo. But before we get into that, I gotta tell you, be sure to stick around till the very end of the lesson because I've got a free gift for you and your guitar that you're both gonna love. All right, so let's get right into it. What is this trick that makes your blues solos great? Well, it's actually a little bit of a continuation of a previous lesson I did where I talked about playing over chord changes, but in a way that's really, really simple and boiled down, focusing on triads or chords essentially, right? 3-note groups that consist of a chord that can actually follow along with the chord changes to add some really interesting harmonic sort of direction that takes you well outside of that pentatonic box. But we're going to expand on that even further and learn some full-blown arpeggios that you can use over a blues progression, like the one at the beginning of the video, that's comprised of 7th chords or dominant chords. So there's a lot of interesting, colorful notes that we can mess around with that actually highlight the chords that happen to be right in the neighborhood of the pentatonic scale as we know it. So a very common move when you're playing over a slow blues in A is to go straight to the A minor pentatonic scale, right? We know it, we love it. And I mean, that's great, and it really shouldn't get boring, right? You shouldn't be able to burn yourself out on ideas of even with just a singular scale. It's generally the same approach that you have to that scale that's what gets boring. But we're gonna step outside of that and not really think in terms of scales. We're gonna think more in terms of chords and really focus on the changing chords in this particular blues progression. So in the progression, we have 3 chords. We have an A7 chord, all right? Then we have a D7 chord, that's our 4 chord, and then our 5 chord is an E7 chord. So just 3 chords, and they're all made up of, like I said, these really pretty colorful notes that make them those dominant 7th chords, right? Particularly this flat 7 note right here, when it's paired with that major 3rd, it's like a tritone kind of thing, but in this context, just sounds really bluesy and pretty. So we're going to exploit that with this little trick here. So we're going to go beyond just 3-note triads, and like I said, we're going to expand on them to full-blown arpeggios. So basically, the rule is this. There are 3 chords in the progression. So each chord would have a corresponding arpeggio, because all arpeggio is just a broken up chord. You're just kind of breaking it up into its individual notes. But all of the notes imply that same chord. So mathematically, if you play, let's say, an A7 arpeggio over an A7 chord, it is 100% of the time going to sound good and sound correct, and it'll always work. We just need to take that and multiply it by 3 and really pay attention to the chord changes so we can adapt to the new arpeggios that are going to accommodate those new chords. So that's really the long and short of it. So let's take a look at if one chord is an A7 chord, right? We're going to be playing an A7 arpeggio to that. So let's break that down note for note. You'd be starting 2nd finger here on the 5th fret of the low E string. That's our root note. And then you're going to play 4th fret of the A string with your 1st finger. Your pinky's going to reach over and play the 7th fret on that A string. And then it's 5th fret, 7th fret on the D string. And then you're going to play 6th fret on the G string. And then 5th fret, 8th fret on the B string. And then finally on the high E string, we're going to do a little bit of a stretch, 5th fret, 9th fret. But here's the thing, if let's say your hand can't quite stretch that far yet, it's okay if you travel over to it. It doesn't have to be played like this. You can do this. You can reach over to it if you have to at this point in time until you develop the dexterity to make that reach. You're still going to be able to get plenty of use out of this particular high note up here, even if you can't stretch all the way to it at this moment in time. So let's play through this whole arpeggio real quick. And then if we think about the A7 chord, right? It's got the exact same tonality, that dominant 7th tonality. We're hearing all of the necessary components that make up this sound in this arpeggio. Now here's the thing, just like with scales, what you don't want to do is fall into the trap, like let's say once you learn this arpeggio. You don't want to fall into the trap of, okay, the only way I'm going to play it is I'm just going to ascend it and then descend it. Of course, I'm demonstrating it to you, so I'm going to play it that way, so we're, you know, breaking it down, but when you're actually executing music with it, right, you don't want to fall into that trap, because the only use that arpeggio is going to have for you is just reflecting on that habit of just doing this, right, which there's probably going to be a time and place for ascending and descending, but if that's all you're doing, you're not getting the fullness, the musical potential really out of it. So you don't want to fall into that trap of just ascending it and descending when we're actually playing the music. Just wanted to mention that disclaimer first before we proceed. But that is the arpeggio that we're going to focus on. Whenever we hear that one chord in the progression, we're going to be playing any assortment of those notes, right? It doesn't have to ascend or descend. What I like to do is to just take every note and just like really listen to what it does in the progression. What kind of tension does it bring to my ear? And if there's certain things I like, then I'll just like take note, be like, okay, this note in particular has a really cool, interesting, colorful sound. I like that. I'm going to use that more often, right? And then you can form entire licks and phrases around it. So you're not having to go like ascending and descending, like I said. You can do something like this, you know, something like that. You're still ascending a little bit, but it's actually deliberately a phrase. And I'm doing little guitar linguistics, right? I'm doing little slides and some vibrato, right, to give it some character, give it a voice, right? And then, you know, you have this, it covers all 6 strings, so you got a lot of like space to mess around with this. You can do something like, right? There's all kinds of things you can do to make them actual phrases as opposed to just ascending and descending the arpeggio. So really had to drive that point home, because on my watch, you're never going to fall into that habit, okay? I'm not going to let it happen, because it has plagued me for years. I know it's plagued millions of other guitar players. I definitely don't want that to happen to you, because I know how frustrating it is to break down that bad habit and then rebuild new ones. It set me back so many years, you know? So I don't want that happening to you. So now that we actually know that arpeggio, let's break down the other 2, and then we'll actually talk about how to use them. So the 4 chord, right, is our D7 chord. We're now going to play a D7 arpeggio. So we're going to play it in a way that stays within the neighborhood, especially of that A minor pentatonic scale box that we know and love. We're going to stay really within that region of the fretboard. We're not going to have to, you know, add any additional pressure of having to, you know, go to the low register or the high register. Like, we're just going to focus in this area right here. So this perfectly viable D7 arpeggio starts on the 5th fret of the A string, and then 4-7 on the D string, and then 5-7 on the G string, and then just 7 on the B string, and then we're going to play 5-8 on the high E string. So see how, or rather hear how that tonality the tonality is exactly the same, right? It's really highlighting all those notes. You know, to make it imply that D7 chord. So when the progression shifts, when it moves to the 4 chord, that's when it's like, it should trigger a response in our minds. We're like, ooh, okay, now I can play the D7 arpeggio. And then when it wants to resolve back to the 1 chord, you know, when it goes there, then it's like, okay, we're back to the 1 chord, we're back to A7. Now, that new response that's going to be triggered in our minds is, we play the A7 arpeggio now. All right, however you want to play it. So as long as it's not descending like what I just did there. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm kidding. So if we're going to be, if that's how that's going to play out, listen to this. If I have no backing, I'm not going to turn on the backing track or anything. I'm just going to play, I'm going to start on the 4 chord, right? I'm going to start on D7, and then I'm going to resolve it to the A7, and you're going to be able to hear the chord changes without any kind of backing. So check this out. All right, if I'm starting in D7. All right, so hopefully you could hear, like when I went from right there, it's like, ooh, okay, I can hear the implied change now. You know, and then now it's like I've highlighted that arpeggio. So that's essentially how it works, where you can actually hear it for yourself. You can hear the results yourself without even having the backing track there in the first place. Oh, and by the way, if you're getting some value out of this lesson, please do me a favor and hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Really helps us out, and it lets us know that you want to see more lessons just like this one, which we'd be more than happy to give you. So thanks in advance, and let's get right back to it. And that's what's great about this, is that you can learn these arpeggios, practice them, and just kind of woodshed them on your own, and then you can be in control over, you know, what chord are you implying based on that knowledge. And then when you throw on the backing track, then it's like icing on the cake. And you're like, I got this. I'm going to listen for the changes. I'm going to match the arpeggio with the chord, right? At whatever time in the progression, whatever the timeline of the progression is. And it's going to sound way more musically intelligent, you could say, right? And it does allow you to, I mean, you really got to think on your feet, and you have to listen for the changes. It's, you know, unlike playing just one scale where wherever you're at, you can just play that one scale and it'll pass. This time you really got to pay attention to the changes, right? But we only got 3 chords to worry about. So speaking of which, let's get into the third chord, which is the 5 chord, right? E7. Let's get into that. We're going to be arpeggiating it thusly. We start on the 7th fret to the, 5th fret to the 7th fret on the A string. All right. In fact, I actually recommend you use these 2 fingers, your second finger and your pinky here. It'll make sense as we get through it. So 5th fret, 7th fret on the A string, and then we have the 6th fret of the D string. Then we have 4, 7 on the G string, 5 on the B string, and then 4, 7 on high E. So the whole arpeggio. Remember, this is an E7 arpeggio, so the root note is E. So even though it's preceded by that flat 7, which is also here in the arpeggio, right? That's not the root note, right? So that's like a nice lead-in that resolves right there to that root note there. So, and in the diagrams, you'll see that they're highlighted red. Those are the root notes for each chord. So that's our E7 arpeggio. And you would use it the same way, even though it's a different shape, you'd use it the same way as you would the other 2 arpeggios. But again, don't fall into that trap of just ascending and descending. When I'm demonstrating it, just to show it to you, like, you know, it's fine, it's logical, it makes sense. But when we're actually playing the music, we want to really just milk every note for what it's worth and take advantage of the fact that we have so many notes to work with. Remember, we've expanded beyond just 3-note groupings with the triads. This is like, you know, the next level of that. So even though a lot of the notes are repeated, we can get the same note but in a different octave, and it gives us a different sort of color, different timbre, which is really fun to play with. So now that we know all 3, I'm just going to show you all 3 right now. A7. Now I'm going to descend with D7. And then I'll ascend again with the E7. All right, and then descend with the 1 chord, the A7. So, you know, they don't all occupy all 6 strings, only the A7 does, but you can still hear that there's enough notes in there to imply the changes. So I'm gonna do it one more time, and I'm not gonna talk through it. I'm gonna have you kind of maybe figure it out if you can hear it, you know, with your own ears. I'm gonna just start on a random chord, and then let's just go from there. So there, hopefully you can at least hear the changes. It's okay if you didn't really nail at first listen, you know, what chords I was playing, but hopefully you can at least hear the movement of the chords. So I started on the 5 chord, right? I started with, and then I threw in the 4 chord, and then resolved it on the 1 chord, you know. And then I threw in another 5 chord, I think. And then back to the 1 chord. So it's like you can hear the changes of the chords happening. So imagine when you actually have the backing track on, how cool that's going to actually play out, and it'll really upgrade the sound of your blues solo. So I'm going to throw on the backing track, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to really make a point to just play individual notes and just feel it out, because that's what I want you to do. I want you to feel it out and really find spots that you like. There may be spots you like more than others, and you'll probably end up using them more than others, but you want to let it almost guide you to where you're trying to go musically with it, as opposed to just shooting in the dark and then just seeing what lands. You want to actually have some intention behind what you're playing. So really take the time to get to know what each of these notes can give you in each arpeggio, and then just focus on just little phrases at a time, and then you can expand further. But again, do not fall into that trap of just ascending and descending the arpeggio. So let's just try it out kind of note for note and see what happens. Alright, so just kind of feeling my way through with it, having fun with it, but also letting it sort of dictate where things are going. So you can start off, let's say, shooting in the dark, right? And just kind of being like, ooh, that sounded kind of cool. I like that. Let me expand on that, right? You want to let it inspire the ideas, because you want to be a step ahead. Your brain wants to be a step ahead of what your fingers are doing when you're playing, right? You want your brain, your mind, your musical soul, whatever you want to call it, you want that to dictate what your hands do. You don't want it to be the other way around. But in the beginning, you can kind of wander around and see if there's something gets inspired. And who knows, lightning might strike. You might think, ooh, okay, I just came up with a phrase that I like. I'm going to go ahead and run with that. And that's how you start building your own bag of tricks, your own little arsenal of original licks that you came up with. These aren't licks that I'm telling you to play, or that you're seeing someone else, on the internet play, or, those are fine. Like, lick chasing is fun, but it shouldn't be like all you have. Like, your whole library shouldn't be comprised of just other people's licks. You want to be able to come up with your own stuff. So this is a great way to just break out of that pentatonic rut, that singular scale kind of box that you find yourself in most of the time, and actually inspire brand new ideas that will actually work perfectly in tandem with your pentatonic box. So you can always incorporate that in there and start doing both. It's a win-win, really. What if I told you that this is just the tip of the iceberg with what you can learn to play truly great blues guitar solos? Because I happen to have, for you, right now, something that'll immediately skyrocket you to that next level. Remember, I said there's a free gift in it for you for sticking around till the end of the lesson, which you have if you're watching this right now. So I gotta make good on my promise and show you exactly what I'm talking about. And here it is. Ha! This bad boy right here is a blues solo heat map, and this is gonna show you how to play blazing hot blues solos all up and down that dang fretboard. I'm talking no stone left unturned. So take what we learned today in this small region of the fretboard and imagine it expanded across the entire dang thing. And it's yours, absolutely free. Just be sure to click right here to claim your copy, or check that link in the description box. I want you to know that this is the beginning of a very exciting time in your guitar playing, where you're now gonna start getting into the DNA of chords, what makes them up, and how you can actually exploit them to get the best possible sounds out of your guitar solos.